Hey, Professor Haystacks here, and today I have this little Steven Universe pony. As you can see, it's got a jewel. Actually, maybe you can't see, but I'm going to put a little Stevie over there. That is by Silverband's Custom Ponies that I got at Super Speedy CiderCon, not to be confused with Ciderfest, which it often is. Anyway, today I will be taking a look at To Where and Back Again, A Pony's Holiday. If you There and Back Again, A Hobbit's Holiday is the title of The Hobbit. Not done the past few episodes because I have been distracted with convention stuff, but let us move on. Now, we have in the opening scene Derpy as the mail mare again, which was nice to see. Also the Superman, is it a bird, is it a parasprite, etc. Also, I'm wondering, why are they boxing the old books? It's a magic castle. They have a huge amount of space. Why don't, they have enough space for these books? Does he just have that many books? I do kind of wish we'd seen just how she apologized how Starlight apologized to her village, and what their reaction was, but also, while we're at it, why they turned away from her so easily. That always kind of bugged me, because most of them joined willingly because they wanted to be rid of their cutie marks and the burden they felt it placed on them. But they revealed that she was lying about one thing, somewhat reasonably, because if she gave up her cutie mark, she wouldn't be able to take away anyone else's. As a result, it always felt a little forced to me. Also, now, we have something called the Sunset Festival. Now, a book that came out about this time is Twilight Sparkle and the Forgotten Books of Autumn, which mentions the autumnal equinox. Not one of their better horse-based puns. But this would presumably be something in the same vein. Now, the problem is, if this goes with the fall, it would imply that the heartwarming episode takes place after this, which is possible. Famously, in the first 3 seasons, we're given events all out of order, because I think, does heartwarming come before Nightmare Nights in that one? Anyway, the timeline would work pretty better. Now, it concerns me, again, when Luna invades dreams. Now, in this case, she had a good... Well, never mind, that's later. But Luna invading dreams, that's a huge invasion of privacy. No one, even including Luna, seems at all concerned about that. And given that in Do Princesses Dream of Magic Sheep we had Luna as a penitent, you'd think she'd be a little more concerned about it. But I don't know that they have a concept of privacy so much in there. Although Rarity didn't want Spike to see them getting dressed, despite the fact that they don't usually wear clothes. So they clearly have some notion of privacy. And moving along, this time, rather than having a clip run beside me, I do actually want to show it so you'll have the audio.
Thanks so much for doing this, Trixie. When Twilight said I should bring a friend, you were the first pony I thought of.
Great idea, Princess Twilight. Asking me, Starlight's best friend, to help her on this difficult journey really shows how wise a princess you have become.
Thanks, Trixie. I was talking about me.
Okay, here we see Twilight being jealous and Trixie fanning the flames and clearly enjoying it. She likes getting one over on Twilight on that. The village ponies basically sought out Starlight and then immediately start asking for advice. And remember, most of those ponies had actively sought out a village that was essentially a cult. So apparently none of them are particularly good leaders, which makes a certain degree of sense. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have been there. So, I mean, there was obviously some emotional turmoil involved in them coming there, but there was apparently more than that. Now, Starlight freaks out and flees. And then we see a series of scenes. I'll show a clip from one with the audio, and then we'll see the rest just in the background.
Hey! You?
So, you're probably wondering why I'm back so soon.
Where were you?
I went to my old village for the festival.
Ooh, sounds fun! How was it?
It was kind of a disaster. I came back early because I freaked out.
Ooh, sounds awful! Bye!
Okay, now at first my thought was mirror universe. It wasn't until we got the Luna thing that I realized they were changelings. Now, changelings can apparently mimic dreamwalking or maybe just do it on their own, because we see them dragging Luna back. So they've clearly got some sort of ability in that region. And also, Luna was under the magic dampening field, which means her dreamwalking abilities aren't normal magic. That's an interesting point. But the fact that she was in their little pods and was able to do this lends some credence to my hypothesis that Nightmare Moon was in a semi-suspended animation dream state on the moon, which would explain a lot, but I'm not going to go into that there. Also, this time, all 4 princesses get to be completely useless, with the partial exception of Luna. That's a nice change of pace. Usually only 2 of them are useless at any given time. Now, next up, we see Thorax. I do kind of wish we'd also gotten to see Kevin, unless they're maybe the same. Who knows? Discord, we see that Discord is OP, please nerf, which they did later on. But Discord is not so concerned when he hears about the princesses, but freaks out at Fluttershy. Though dagnabbit, I still like Celeste Cord. The possible rationalization here is that the princesses are presumed to be able to handle themselves more than Fluttershy, or possibly he's not concerned because this is the 3rd time Celestia has been kidnapped, and the 5th time she's been captured. 6th if Discord captured her, but she didn't seem to because she sent letters. Celestia was kidnapped this time, so that's 1. She was kidnapped by Nightmare Moon, and she was kidnapped by the Plunderseed Vines. And she was also captured by Queen Chrysalis in the Canterlot Wedding episode. And she was also captured... when was the other time she was captured? Oh, now I can't... Oh, Tirek. She was also captured by Tirek. So Celestia has been kidnapped 3 times and captured 5 at this point. So maybe there's not all that much reason to be concerned about her, but I think this is the first time Fluttershy has been kidnapped and only like the 2nd time she's been captured. Twilight is also supposed to be Discord's friend, but I guess they thought it was more funny if he just freaks out at Fluttershy's. Also, Thorax's wings are some foreshadowing to the somewhat controversial bit in the next part, which we'll get to in a moment. So, in the next part, we see here that Discord tries to teleport them in and doesn't make it, and then sends a flying pig in that disappears at the boundary. It's interesting that this rock doesn't affect changeling magic, which is a little odd. I'll get into that more later, but this does lead into a potential problem. Interesting point. The rock doesn't affect changeling magic, but it does affect both pony magic and chaos magic. Probably dark magic too. It's hard to believe Celestia or Twilight wouldn't have at least tried that at some point. We know they can do a little bit of it. This is, though, a persistent problem. Discord can instantly solve most physical threats. They have to either have him not be there or have him neutralized like this. Also, we have some tension between Discord and Trixie, somewhat similar to Discord and Celestia. So, Discord Trixie, or Dixie, I'm going to call it. Anyone? Now, here we see that the Changeling Hive is always changing, which draws the question of whether that's an inherent function of Changeling buildings might be imbued with some of their magic, or is it maybe the work of the rock? Alright, now I'm going to show a brief montage here.
Not exactly great and powerful, but effective.
I'll take it.
Klutzy?
Draconicus.
Believe me, I was just as surprised as you are that I'm here. When I heard that I'd be playing for a bunch of changelings, I was beside myself. Then I realized it was just one of you. But seriously, this isn't the toughest crowd I've ever been in front of, but it's definitely the easiest to bug.
But what?
But you are obviously not Fluttershy.
Oh.
I mean, I'm separated from the group and just happened to come across the one pony I care most about. I can smell this setup a mile away.
No, you're right. There's no way you should trust me. Just go find the others. I understand.
Oh, come on!
We're probably all changelings. You shouldn't rescue any of us. Unless you think maybe one of us might be the real Fluttershy. Oh, that certainly would be a nasty changeling trick, wouldn't it? I'm the real one. I'm the real one. I'm the real Fluttershy. I call it the changeling catcher.
And we have a nice little parade of tricks and counter tricks, but then at the end we have Discord distracted with Fluttershies, Fluttershies, something like that. I mean, he did figure out they're almost certainly not real pretty much immediately, but he wasn't willing to risk it. Although, now that we're at it here, why did Discord show up all of a sudden in part 1? It was pretty random. But anyway, we'll skip ahead to the end here. Again, I'll have clips running in the background that I can't see. So, Thorax transforms, the rock is shattered, and then the changelings kind of all transform. But leading into that, we find out that changelings are always hungry, no matter how much they feed, which indicates that there's a problem there. Creatures can't really normally function that way. Thorax finds that he's no longer hungry now that he's sharing love and not just draining it. Though we also found out that in his debut episode that apparently changelings can go at least a year without feeding. I mean, they feel really hungry, but they're not actually dying. This indicates that they're not actually getting energy from love. They must either eat normal food or possibly feed on magic. If they feed on magic, given that the magic of friendship is a thing here, it's possible that love in some form allows them to access magic better. This would explain why they can go a long time without feeding, without starving to death. But Chrysalis fed on Shining and got more powerful because it increased her connection to the magic field. Now, on this point, I'd like to point out in one of the Sideways Stories from Wayside School books, there was a quote that said, "Love isn't like a pencil. If you give a pencil away, you no longer have a pencil. But if you give love away, you have even more of it." Thus, by actually experiencing and sharing love, the changelings don't feel hungry because it becomes a self-perpetuating feedback loop, meaning they don't have to actually drain it from anyone. We also have, in order to fill a plot hole in the Canterlot Wedding, the changelings can also feed on fear and other emotions, although it's not as effective. But anyway, doing so doesn't give them any energy, presumably. Since the changelings are always hungry and Thorax found a way to not always be hungry, it actually makes sense that the changelings would abandon Chrysalis. There's a saying that the great masses of people will overlook a good many injustices as long as they don't go hungry. But they are going hungry, so their leadership is clearly failing them. So this rebellion is reasonable, as was that Thorax transformed into a Chrysalis-like king, which I kind of predicted. I mean, not until right before it happened, but and in this regard, while I feel like his design looks a little too deer-like and not enough insect-like, this parallels the evolution of fairies in popular lore. In older stories, fairies were scary and at least mischievous and generally outright evil. But as time wore on, fairies became more like Tinkerbell, benevolent spirits, and thus the evolution of the changelings can be seen to parallel that. Given that they even knew the word changeling, I think the writing staff was probably quite aware of this. I do feel the rest of the hive should have had to earn that transformation. I do note they transformed not into the king type, but into a new type of drone. There are a couple of post hoc rationalizations for this. The first is that the stone actually suppressed this transformation process and made it more difficult, and thus Thorax had to go through a lot more grief than the others did to do it. The other is that Thorax shared his love with them, enabled them to transform, possibly when he hit the queen, because she rejected it, but she's connected to the hive in some kind of way. I think, since they seem to have an instinctive loyalty to her. Another part is that their love of the queen was somehow involved, and that's what they shared, but they had kind of just abandoned their queen, so I don't feel like that one really holds water. One possibility is that it's a shift of loyalty so that their form changes to match their new ruler. Note well in this that Thorax is bigger. And is he technically female now? Because they're set up like hive insects. I've seen a fan fiction speculating on that, but it's also possible that all changelings are female in a sense. They don't really reproduce normally, as far as we know. But some animals will undergo a gender change when a gender imbalance exists. So even if they are female in a sense, drones in insect hives can't have children anyway. So it's possible this is a shift, like certain animals will change gender when there's an imbalance, notably clownfish, like in Finding Nemo. Obviously they don't have that happen in Finding Nemo, but it does happen to clownfish in the wild. So it could be that they were all female, but he transformed into a queen female. Anyway. But anyway, this transformation implies that the insectile form is supposed to be an intermediate stage. It's supposed to go larva, we see in Thorax's debut episode, to the insect-like changeling form we see, which is presumably supposed to be an adolescent form, and then to the fairy type. But this hasn't happened to them. There's a couple of possibilities. It could be the stone. It could be isolation. The comics imply there were a magic accident by Star Swirl, but I don't really think that fits with this, because then there's no reason they would even have this transformation in the first place. And honestly, they could have had a whole arc next season with changelings earning the morph, but well, hindsight 2020. Unanswered question: does Chrysalis know that transformation is possible and was keeping it from them? It seems likely. She seems to be the mother of all the changelings of the hive, which means they only know about changelings what she's told them. So if she's evil, that would do that. But if she didn't know, we fall into the old saying that she was just trying to do what's best for her people, and thus her only evil act is the rejection of the alternate path at the end, which would allow them to live in peace with the ponies. But of course she does reject it. It could just be because of pride, but there could be something else going on here. There's a theory that she was the love poison princess, which they were assumed to be ponies, but what if they weren't? What if they were an ancient changeling kingdom that, owing to the action of the love poison, their kingdom fell, and her king, one of them had used the love poison on the other as part of an ill-conceived, effectively date rape attempt. But the king died, and that broke the love poison since she couldn't look at him anymore. But she could have been, she could have gotten pregnant in the interim, and thus given birth to the changeling subsequently, if they do reproduce that way. Now, this queen would see love as a destructive force and would vow never to give it again and never to feel it. This would cause her to revert to the insectile stage, and her children would never know that that isn't the end point. This would make Chrysalis more potentially redeemable. It would explain why she chooses rejecting shared love over the good of the hive. Also, the question is, if they don't reproduce sexually, does she have the ability to form a new hive on her own? I don't know. And if they do reproduce sexually, could she use an unwitting stallion by replacing his wife, like she sort of nearly did with Cadence and Shining Armor? Either way, could she start a new hive? Maybe. That would be an interesting thing. Less charitable possibility is that Chrysalis was involved in a power struggle on the Changeling Kingdom and fled or destroyed the Old Kingdom, or caused it to be destroyed. Since love was be considered an impediment to absolute power and absolute loyalty from her subjects, she would not experience it herself and would suppress it in her subjects so that none of them became more powerful than her and usurped her place. This would mean that her ultimate goal was always world domination. This would make her pretty darn evil, and very low chance of redemption since she had consistently chosen an evil path all along, if this is the case. I like to compare this with Salamander from the recently recovered Doctor Who serial The Enemy of the World, who is played by the same actor who plays the second Doctor. But Salamander is one of the most evil enemies in all of Doctor Who because he doesn't have any Freudian excuses. Even the Daleks were made that way, and Davros, who made the Daleks, was trying to ensure his species' survival. But Salamander just wanted power and was willing to destroy anyone and anything it took to gain that power. It's not just ends justify the means, but rather that the ruler, Salamander or Chrysalis, believes that everyone else on Earth, or in Equestria, is inherently inferior and should be ruled by them, and anyone who rejects it deserves death or imprisonment. Anyway, the last question is, what were the Changelings doing in the last year and a half-ish? By season changes, it's been around that since the last Changeling. I mean, it depends on how achronological it is. If the heartwarming episode takes place before this, it's been over 2 years, just judging by the heartwarming episodes. We have to go by season changes. If the heartwarming episode happens after this, then it's been less than 2 years. The only thing I can think is that she was sneaking infiltrators close to the princesses, either as new ponies, so as not to arouse suspicion, or as new guards. I think the new ponies would make more sense because the personality giveaway was what messed up her plan to replace Cadence, and she might have learned from that. Now, it would take time for these changeling infiltrators to pose as new ponies and rise up through the ranks of the royal guards to get close to the princesses. Except for Princess Twilight, who lets pretty much just anyone wander around her castle with no supervision. But with the other three, it would have taken time, but they would have eventually reached that point, and then at the ideal moment, just replace the royal families. Equestria is a trusting enough society that this is probably doable. It might only take about a year and a half to do this. Let's assume they took time to regroup, so about a year. Most times it would take longer than that, but Equestria is trusting enough. That's not an unreasonable time frame for this plan to work. So, I believe that is all I had to say. I have now gone on for, not as long as I thought it was, Probably gonna have to cut this down a bit. Anyway, hopefully getting some collaborative efforts going soon. So look forward to that. And comment on my dress. I'm just wearing a Sunday shirt under my lab coat here. I just did this right after getting home from church. Anyway, I've been Professor Haystacks, and this has been my analysis of To Where and Back Again, A Pony's Holiday. And good night, and drive safely. My little pony, what will today's adventure be? My little pony, plus something, yeah. Da 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 da. Don't know what they're saying here. My little pony, I'll be there right by your side. I'll be there right by your side.